Hello, everybody. We're just going to leave it maybe one more minute. I can see there's participants still joining, so we'll give it another 60 seconds or so as the numbers keep increasing, and we'll start in about 1 minute or so. Okay, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon and good evening to those joining us not in the UK as well, of course. Welcome to what's the second in our series of Brexit webinars that Ligentia are hosting in partnership with our partner VARTAN Consultancy. I'm James Paybody. I'm the UK Sales Director for Ligentia, and shortly I'll be introducing you to Miles Vartan, who's Managing Director of VARTAN Consultancy. Now, VARTAN specialise in customs compliance, health and safety in particular, and we've worked with VARTAN for a number of years, in particular on our own AEO accreditation process some years ago, on specific customs compliance projects, and more recently over the last couple of years around our own Brexit preparations. I can see there's again a large number of attendees. We had our first workshop a couple of weeks ago. Again, attendance was really high. Lots of questions, lots of engagement. So very confident that we'll have a similar process today as well. Of the people who are on the webinar, I can see some people know us at Ligentia very well, some less so. So welcome to everybody. If it's your first, your second webinar, or if you do or don't know us to a large extent. So thank you very much for joining indeed. Moving to the next slide, which hopefully can keep up with me today. Here we go. So today's agenda is around the preparation for Brexit. So we're nearing the end of the transition period on the 31st of December, and we'll very much run today similar to the session that we did 2 weeks ago. I'll talk for no more than about 5 minutes or so before I hand over to Miles. Miles will cover the main brunt of the topic today on Brexit planning and what we need to have in place for the end of the transition period. And that should free up 25 to 30 minutes for the Q&A, and that's to make it really relevant. On the Q&A side, and last time we had to take a lot of questions away, we did run out of time, but we got back within 24 hours to those questions that were left outstanding. For those of you who are not so familiar with Zoom, I think we've all probably become more familiar with Teams and Zoom over the last 12 months or so. But if you look towards the bottom of your screen, if you have a question, you will see there's a Q&A icon right at the bottom. So if you were to click on the Q&A icon, pop your question in there at any point in today's webinar. And once we get to the Q&A section in section 3, I'll facilitate the questions to Miles, and we'll look to cover as many of those questions as comprehensively as we can within the allotted time. And as I say, we'll get back to you within 24 hours if there are any questions we're not able to cover within the time we have today. Okay. So as a bit of an overview on Ligentia and our business, for those of you who are not so aware of us, Ligentia are 24 years old. We are one of the largest independent freight forwarders and supply chain management companies in the UK. We operate a UK and a global network across multiple customer sectors and multiple global trade lanes linking countries together. In terms of the core services that sit behind our offering, ocean freight creates the bulk of our business. So 73% of group sales, we will move around 150,000 TEUs a year. And that's across a variety of shipping lines, a variety of contractual agreements. And then we move towards air freight, which again, a smaller percentage of group sales. But that being said, we will tend to move around 20 million kilos in a normal year, we should say. And again, that's across block space agreements, commercial airlines, full and part chartered. And this year, in response to the COVID-19 situation, both our ocean air freight services have taken large spikes as well in terms of the support we've given to the import of PPE into the UK and other regions around the world. Logistics continues to be a growing sector within our business. Constitutes around 10% of our group sales. And we operate sites all around the world, as you can see from the slide in front of you. And that's bonded sites, it's pick and pack operations, it could be basic storage operations, and that continues to flourish within our business. And I mentioned VARTAN today, so we work in partnership with VARTAN to support in the main what tend to be consultancy projects. But Ligentia, as a business, we are an AEO approved customs broker, and we operate an in-house dedicated customs team. This year we've bolstered that team in terms of added people to it in preparation for Brexit. We've also done a lot around RPA, which is robotic process automation, so automating some of the more manual back office processes that frees up our people to add value to our customers. And also we have badges at all the channel ports to support the movement of goods through different avenues, which at the moment is certainly a very pertinent topic across ocean freight and also trailer moves in and around Europe. And I think in addition to those services, those are our core services, we're also moving regular rail containers from Asia into Europe, as we are across the trucking network and sea air solutions that we're all looking to work with on a regular basis to provide solutions to our customers. Around our core services, so our functionalities here, you'll see at the bottom of the slide, we have a little phrase called data-driven supply chains. And that really embodies our tech solutions. So our proposition to our customers always involves our own in-house technology. We're very tech-driven freight forwarder supply chain management business. We have our own in-house systems driven from our tech team in Leeds in the UK. And that might be Ligentia, our supply chain management and exception system, whereby we provide visibility and control over customer shipments down to an SKU level if required. And then also within our customer hub, which drives the communication possibilities within our customer base. It pulls all our systems together and it provides a real 360-degree view of our customers' supply chains. And from that 360-degree view, we can drive customer analytics and predictive analytics as well, so we can support customers with forecasts, best routes to market, try and prevent stock outs and overstocks and what have you. So within our business, there's a number of layers of how we deal with customers and how we foster those long-term relationships, essentially. As we move towards introducing Miles into the conversation from VARTAN, just to frame it really, those of you who were on the call a couple of weeks ago will have seen this slide before, where we talk about global disruption and change. So on that side, we have a number of acute issues, or we've experienced a number of acute issues this year as a result of COVID. Those of you based in the UK may have seen that the UK ports and shipping lines made front page news on the BBC, which is fairly unprecedented. And the capacity issues, the rate fluctuations, equipment shortages, and the UK port delays that are continually being experienced as a consequence of a number of factors. In terms of circumnavigating those, we always looking at alternative routes to market, but really planning is the absolute key, and forecasting to understand the routings available and how to support our customers to achieve stock in warehouse dates across these continual bottlenecks that we're experiencing in the market. Before I hand over to Miles, just to again frame the session. So today we'll be talking about again the measures that we need to have in place before we end the transition period on the 31st of December. And as per the previous workshop, what we're very clear to discuss is the facts and what we know now, rather than speculate, certainly within our presentation piece. We're happy to field any questions towards the end, no matter if they may be speculative or information not involved that we know at the moment. But what I would say is we have a follow-up workshop in 2 weeks, and that should pull in a recent an announcement we're expecting from Boris Johnson on the 23rd of November, which should provide a lot more detail on some of the questions at the moment that are unanswered across the market. So what I will do, if I can hand over to you, Miles, I can see you here, and I will leave you to talk through the main body of the presentation. I'll be back shortly, and in the meantime, I'll be collating the questions, which I can see have already just about started.
Okay, so thank you, James. So good morning, everybody, and thank you, Ligentia, for the opportunity to participate in this session. We've got a series of slides which I'm going to be trying to get through in the next 20 minutes. So please ask away questions, and as James said, we'll address those that I haven't answered a little bit later on. So from January 2021, you are going to need, as importers, exporters, processors, manufacturers, you need to understand the requirements of each EU member state, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. You're going to need a EORI number. So most of you, in fact, registered businesses either had one or were granted one last year. So this is a recognition identification data point, which allows you to trade internationally, well, with the EU and internationally, but also is recognised by the customs chief computer and helps with your risk rating. And also you want to be considering, although this has dropped down the list a little bit, but consider going for an AEO certification process, as when you go for customs authorizations such as customs warehousing, ETSF, authorized consignor, authorized consignee, you'll find that AEO will speed up that process. So need to move the slide on. Thank you. So from the 1st of January 2021, whatever is announced on the 23rd of November, if in fact our Prime Minister does make an announcement on the 23rd of November, every import and export entering the UK will need a customs declaration. So even if we are told there's a free trade agreement, does not take away the need for a customs declaration. Full border controls will be put in place. Largely because of coronavirus, but also I believe because of the complexity and the knowledge that people are going to have to take on board, in some cases in fairly short measure. Every consignment will not need to have a full customs declaration done, i.e. paying duty, before the 1st of July, but we'll come on to that in a second. So I will refer to the border operating model a little bit later on, but there are 3 stages from January 2021, and for those who are not bored of hearing it, that's 1 minute past 11 on the 31st of December, not 1 minute past midnight, because we're an hour behind the rest of the EU. So non-controlled goods or standard goods will have to come into the country with some form of control, and we'll touch on entry into declarant records a little bit later on. Whilst tariffs will need to be paid on all imports, payments can be deferred until customs declaration have been made. There's already been a question about this in terms of the period. So supplementary declaration period is from the 1st of January to the 30th of June. But then as of the 1st of July, all declarations have to be made as and when entries are made into the country. You need to consider how you account for that, but there is a slide a little bit later on from Ligentia about deferred VAT arrangements. And if there are checks required, that will either be done at the port of arrival or at approved premises inland. But physical checks, as some of you will be used to in terms of meat, food, products of animal origin coming from outside the EU, will have to take place at border control posts, but only ports with border control posts. Stage 2, border that kicks in from April. So all products of animal origin must have the associated pre-notification and relevant health documentation with them. Some of you will have heard about that will put pressure on vets, and the government and the border readiness teams are working on the numbers of vets that will need to be available to stamp CVEDs and things like this. So in stage 3, that's the 1st of July. So all goods entering have to make declarations. Full safety and security declarations will be required. And now, again, here I am referring to the border operating model. It's 226 pages last time we counted. And what we've done is to make that easier for you, which you can download the border operating model. We've given you a guide here to some of the key points to refer to. There was a webinar yesterday by HMRC explaining how GVMS is going to work. We saw a test version accessible through a web link, and it did work quite well. Temporary storage, pre-lodgement process maps. The check and I should say an HGV is ready to cross the border service is a replacement for what you might have heard is smart freight. So it's a way in which exporters from the country can check that their vehicles have got the right documentation, and they're going to create 3 authentication points, one at Northfield Air Base or Airfield coming down the M11, one at Ebbsfleet Railway Station, and one at Motus 24, which is on the motorway going down to Dover. So delayed declarations and entry into declarants records. If you would normally applying for this, you would do it through something called, you would get access to it through CFSP, Customs Freight Simplified Procedures. For the first 6 months, from the 1st of January to the 30th of June, if you're bringing goods in from Europe, you do not need to go for authorization for EIDR, formal authorization, but you can take product into your warehouse, into your factory, make an entry into declarants records, but you must contain that following detail, which I've listed there, and then make a supplementary declaration by the 30th of June. To make a supplementary declaration, though, you will need to have CFSP. Sorry. I've just been asked a question, can you send a link for the most up-to-date version of the border operating model, which of course I will. Ligentia and I will make sure that you get access to the full version, not the 138-page version. So just back to this. So it's very important that you record this information. This can be done on an Excel spreadsheet, in your order processing system, pretty much any way you would like to. But let me tell you, if there's a knock on the door from HMRC one day, you need to have it accessible and accessibly quickly, and it needs to be accurate. So it wants to reflect some management control from your business. I was just saying that to make a supplementary declaration, you have to have CFSP. Now, there are only still only about 35 organisations or companies who hold CFSP. If you want to go for CFSP and do a supplementary declaration, then I would advise you to get on with that now. It's the C&E 48 form, which again I'll refer to later in this presentation. You may find that you get awarded it fairly quickly because HMRC and the government are realising that a lot of people may want to go for this. As VARTAN Consultancy, though, what we would advise you to do is to speak to your customs agent. Ligentia are here today. Speak to Ligentia and make sure that they can assure you they have the capacity to do your customs declarations in real time. As quickly the amount of paperwork builds up, the potential debt to HMRC builds up. So if you can, keep up with your customs declarations from the EU as of the 1st of January in real time. If not, take advantage of this easement. So in here, so beyond the 1st of July, you'll need to be authorised to use EIDR, and there's the C&E 48 form I referred you to. If you've got a poor, or if somebody applied and they had a poor recent compliant history, then you may find yourself in, or that company may find themselves in communication with HMRC, who would write them to instruction to make full declarations at the time of import. But it is a facility which is there to help you. You'll find halfway through the application form, you get asked to list the commodity codes that you'll be involved in. Sometimes that list will be fairly lengthy. It's pretty much the only difficult part of the initial application. So I wanted this time, and this is a new slide from our first presentation, because a lot of people asked about this, that authorised consignor and authorised consignee. So many of you will be exporting to the EU and wanting to take the trailer or the container beyond the port of arrival in the EU. So we're talking France, Belgium, Holland, or Germany. You may want to go to Italy or Spain. To do that, you need to have a transit document, which you can raise yourself without being an authorised consignor through a system called NCTS. But if you do that, you're going to need to stop at one of those authentication points I talked about earlier to get it authenticated prior to reporting to the pool. But as an authorised consignor, you can have the status which allows you to raise transit documents yourself. To have or to be able to apply and to be granted that status, you have to start, and your company needs to be involved in starting the movement of the goods from your premises or an approved customs facility. That way that everything's okay, then you will find yourself flying across the border and get to your final destination in Europe, where it will get discharged at an authorised customs facility or by an authorised consignee. Before I go on to authorised consignee though, just remember that you will need to hold a transit guarantee, goods transit guarantee, to cover your authorised consignor, which is very similar to applying for a comprehensive customs guarantee for those who are familiar. As an authorised consignee, and this is what many supply chain managers, as I was one day, will want to go for, to mitigate against any potential risks at the border or the fast-moving short straits ferry ports. Become an authorised consignee and you can move the consignment inland, but you have to have the external temporary storage facility authorisation for your arrival point, where the goods are arrived to. Once it's been arrived at your ETSF, which is a separate authorisation, then customs clearance can be made. Has the added advantage of, say you had a groupage load with 5 consignments on your trailer and there's a problem with one of those consignments, it means that the problematic consignment can be taken off, put into your ETSF, often referred to as a cage, and the remaining 4 elements of the trailer can carry on. So authorised consignor, you must have ETSF. Authorised consignee, you must have an ETSF. And authorised consignor, you have to have a transit guarantee, but you can apply for that electronically online. So what next? Take action now, and please take action now. We are getting phone calls, literally, from people who have only just realised this is happening. All our training dates are rapidly filling up for customs training. Take advantage of the government funding, but please start addressing these issues now. And I've pretty much listed, and we've referred to most of them already, including reading the BOM border operating model. Speak to your EU counterpart. So if you want to sell your goods in Europe, you're going to have to set up a legal entity in Europe. And even once if you get hold of an EU EORI number, that EU EORI number will apply across every member state. But if you're going to sell into France, Germany, and Spain, you must be registered for VAT in France, Germany, and Spain, and that's a separate process. Okay, so thank you very much. I'll just give control back to stop remote control. Okay, back to you, James.
Thank you very much, Miles. Before we go into our live Q&A, we've had a couple of questions on postponed VAT accounting. So we've got a brief slide here, which I'll just kind of read through. So from the 1st of January, if you are registered for VAT and established in the UK, you will be able to account for import VAT on your VAT return for goods imported from anywhere in the world. What this means is that you'll be able to declare and recover your VAT on your quarterly VAT return rather than having to pay for it up front, as is the case now, and then recover it later. So just to cover that question, which we were asked by a few people on this call prior. Moving through then towards the live Q&A, Miles, if you're poised and ready.
Yep, far away.
We had one before the call relating to Northern Ireland, actually, and that was if Northern Ireland strike a last-minute deal with the EU and effectively stay part of the EU, what would the situation be with regards to duty and VAT? Were you exporting to there? So
I don't have the details in front of me, but the Northern Ireland Protocol would kick into place. With the government recently launching the Trader Support Service, or the TSS. So for movements to Ireland and Ireland to the UK, but including Northern Ireland, you can register on the TSS. And if declarations are required, either way, and of course that's a big if, we'll find out the details later. The government are saying through the TSS that the cost of those declarations will be covered by them. So I would encourage you to, if you are involved with Ireland, Northern Ireland, to register on the TSS. It's being backed up by an organisation called Fujitsu, who have been very involved in the replacement for Chief, which is the current customs mainframe computer, and a long list of approved customs agents who have said that they would support the TSS. So I think that would take the pressure away from that, James. But then in terms of detailed answers, I'm afraid we're going to have to wait to see what happens next week.
Sure. Thanks for that question, Kareem. If there's anything else, just drop us a note across to the live Q&A to elaborate if required. Quick question for Cara. There's a couple for me here, actually. Yes, Cara, there will be a recording available for today. What we'll do is we'll share that afterwards via LinkedIn and various other sources. So I'll give you the details on our final slide. But yes, this is being recorded live, so everybody who's on this webinar and everybody else for that matter can get a live recording.
James, could I just come back on something I've just said there as well? So
yeah.
The UK is, right from the very beginning, has remained in the Common Transit Convention. So there's been an awful lot about transit. So for imports of goods into the UK from the EU, and then potentially going on to Ireland. So which would be supported by transit documentation. That is actually getting quite well established now in terms of an understanding. The only question that I'm waiting to get answered is how is T1, if it was going to be, if it was a company goods as they enter the UK, how that T1 or that transport accompanying document, often called the TAD, would be discharged at the office of destination, which is the office of destination in many cases will be the port of arrival in the UK, and we're waiting for clarification. That question was asked to HMRC yesterday. We're just waiting for clarification back on that. I'll update you, James, once we hear about that.
Sure, thank you very much. Question from Dan. It's not a Brexit related question, actually. You're asking about rail freight from Asia, Dan, and if it's running over capacity as well as air and sea freight. The challenges in Asia are fairly acute. So there's obviously the overcapacity into the UK that we're all aware of. The lack of container equipment, particularly 40-foot high cube containers in a lot of places, is also a challenge. Unfortunately, yes, this does affect the rail. We are, as Ligentia, moving containers on rail into Europe as a route, particularly for frustrated sea freight shipments. The LCL rail route, depending on the size of your consignments, is the more available option. The Chinese government have put restrictions on the trains, the age of the containers they can carry. For example, you can't load a container older than 7 years on a train out of China. And also they have temporarily halted the export of rail companies' owned containers on the train, of which there's about 30,000 in Asia. So unfortunately, yes, the same pinches in Asia on rail that and truck that relate to the other modes. However, where there's a will, there's a way. If you want to have a conversation, you'll see an email at the end of this, and I'm happy to pick that up with you to see what solution would be available. As with everything at the moment, forecasting and planning is absolute key. We're seeing we've seen an early spike in import volumes this year, which is a combination of PPE, early Christmas to bring in for the market as well in the UK, and also there's a pre-Brexit scramble as well. Before we get to such time as duty rates might change. So we're all aware of why. So I hope that answers your question, but feel free to elaborate on the email address I give at the end, and I'd be happy to pick it up further with you. Okay. I have a question here, Miles, just relating to India, which I think you've covered in your presentation, but it'd be worth just covering it for clarity for the person who's posed it. It is at present, when India deals with the UK, are they dealing with Europe? And when we have left the EU completely, will anything change now that they will be dealing with the UK rather than Europe?
Okay, so you're going to be dealing with the UK. The UK, rather ignorantly, is now going to be called a third country. We won't be part of the EU. Unless or until there's an agreement made between the UK government and the Indian government in terms of a free trade agreement, which might already be between the EU and India. I'm not too sure of that myself. We would if it's announced next week that there is no free trade agreement with the EU, then we would trade on World Trade Organization terms. Which is going to be a significant difference for most customs agents, because at the moment we work through the EU tariff, otherwise known as TARIC. The one word on free trade agreements is, although there's one recently being announced between the UK and Japan, and also I believe with Canada, there are no details of these free trade agreements yet. Just a good press release is saying that agreement has been made. So we're waiting for details on those agreements.
Okay, thank you, Miles. Question from Gary, and that is, do we need our customers' EORI numbers in Ireland to make a customs declaration?
A customs declaration will need an EORI number, so I think the answer is yes.
Okay. A question from Daniel, actually. Do we have a simple Brexit preparation checklist that we can work through? Like a quick reference guide as such. There was a 200 and something page document you mentioned before, which feels like a long list.
When we were running up to a potential hard Brexit last year, and we were worrying about how vehicles were going to cross the border into the EU, I managed to get it onto a pop-up, a pop-up slide with maybe 9 boxes on it. So I think the answer is yes. Lots of people will provide you with checklists. But possibly what we've been talking about, James, prior to getting ready for this webinar is frequently asked questions. And I think we could probably build the checklist into that frequently asked question guide.
Absolutely. We'll take that away. I think we're looking to disseminate a large amount of information while providing an easy to use guide while not missing out on any key areas. So it's going to be a case of pulling it together, isn't it? Okay. Another question here, and that is, does the deferred customs declaration and duty payable apply to both EU and non-EU supply?
So it's EU supply.
Okay, thank you.
Which is actually when you dig down into it a little bit and have a cup of coffee and talk about it, it's possibly creates some unfair situations. So goods coming in from the EU, you can benefit from supplementary declaration, but without CFSP, you wouldn't be able to do that from outside the EU.
Sure. Got a question here from Jeremy, and that is, do we have to be an authorised consignor, or can we use an agent to do this on our behalf?
So I'll just give you an analogy. So I was asked yesterday by a haulier who moved the bulk tankers on behalf of customers from the UK to the EU, wondering if he could go for authorised consignor. The answer is no, you have to have a loading point. So an agent wouldn't be able to go for authorised consignor unless he actually is part of the loading process. So if you ran a warehouse on behalf of the customer, then I believe that would enable you to have authorised consignor on your own right. But it's normally the loading point or an approved customs location would be granted authorised consignor.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Suzanne, and that is, could our import courier complete the delayed declaration?
Very good question. I think that is probably it's a slightly complicated answer. It's probably going to relate to Incoterms and something like delivered duty paid. So most of you will be familiar with fast parcel operators clearing goods on behalf of the seller and then delivering to you. Funny enough, in many cases, actually, they use your EORI number, given permission to do that by the government. The importer is going to be responsible to make sure declarations are made in line with supplementary declaration process. I may be corrected, stand to be corrected, but I don't think that the agent will be able to do that. I think if they're working for you under direct representation, if the agent's working for the importer under direct representation, then they will produce the supplementary declaration if they've got CFSP. So probably the answer is yes. Sorry for a rather convoluted answer there, but I'd sort of think on my feet a bit.
Yeah, no worries. That's the name of the game in a live Q&A. I'm glad you're sitting in the chair, Miles.
Just maybe it's worth just labouring this point a little bit. So regardless of your Incoterm that you use, and of course, really we're talking about DDP, many importers and manufacturers do not realise that even though the goods are going to be delivered duty paid, literally what it says on the tin, if there's an issue, HMRC will come to you as the importer, and you have an obligation and almost like a promise that you've made to HMRC that you will check that those clearances are being done correctly, even though it's the seller organising the clearances. We got involved with an importer manufacturer several years ago where they were doing inward processing, and the person doing discharging the inward processing documents was made redundant. There was a knock on the door, why are you not discharging your inward processing documents? And it was only then that everybody realised that no one was checking the customs clearance is being made on behalf of the importer, and a large fine was issued by HMRC. So build into your management controls as an importer to check your seller's customs clearance, ask for a C88 and check that everything's been done correctly, because you are liable to be approached by HMRC if that's not the case.
Okay, that's good advice, thank you. A question from Adrian. If you sell to EU countries, do you have to set up a separate company for this? So I'd imagine setting up a separate company at the country of destination in the EU is where the question's focused around.
You can sell from the UK to a customer in the EU, because that's just basically what we're talking about in terms of export customs clearance and delivery. But if you want to do that without transit or any sort of customs obligations, then you have to set up a legal entity and I think often set up a fiscal representative in a country in the EU. And like I say, be VAT registered in every country you're selling to in the EU.
Okay, that answered your question, Adrian. Question from Tony. We are setting up in the Republic of Ireland, maybe with a Republic of Ireland EORI. Will this make any difference to dealing with the continent?
Not too clear on the question, but if you've got an EORI number in the Republic of Ireland, some of us used to call it ERA, but if you have an EORI number in the Republic of Ireland, that EORI number will be recognised in all other 27 countries.
Sure. Okay. And a question from Alan, which I think you've just answered, but just to cover it off. So Alan's selling to distributors in most of the EU countries. Will we need a separate VAT number for each country that we sell to?
Well, implicitly, yes. I had to do a little bit of improve my understanding on this a couple of days ago. So there's a minimum spend in each country, and then even though all these countries are part of the EU, they have different levels. Some are lower than higher. Right. So that's why you have one of the main reasons you have to have individual VAT registration. There are organisations and companies, commercial companies around, who will, I know one, but probably wrong to advertise them on this webinar, but they will look after all your VAT issues throughout the EU. One telephone number, they speak 24 different languages. It's the awkward bit is if you get a letter in a language you don't understand, this company does all the translation. So if anybody wants those details, I'd be more than happy to pass them on.
Thanks, Miles.
It's a return. There's a fee of I can't quote you. Obviously, I know one particular fee, but it's several £1,000s. But they will then take on all that responsibility for you.
Sure, thank you. Another question here, which is a bit of a scenario, and it is, if we land goods into the UK from Asia and then subsequently sell to an EU customer, it seems this is a B2C retailer. So if they're subsequently selling to an EU customer from the UK after importing, I guess, bulk into the UK, can we claim back the UK duty which has been paid?
No, you pay duty twice, unless you came into customs suspense situation in the UK, then you can move it into the EU from the customs suspended authorization, and therefore only pay duty once.
Sure.
But, there are ways in which now, okay, so maybe we could touch on inward processing there, James.
Yeah.
So if you bring in goods from, this happens now, so if you can bring in goods from outside the EU into the UK, you process them, manufacture a drill bit, for example, and then export that into Europe. If you have inward processing authorization from HMRC, which will be quicker to get if you have AEO, but it's not a mandatory requirement. And you can prove, so you need to provide an audit trail of what's come into the UK and then prove, the key thing is proving export. Once you prove that, then you get the duty back on the elements or the items that have gone into your finished product. Many companies don't know about this, and I think it's down through possibly not asking, but through regulatory authorities and the government possibly not explaining that well enough in the past.
Sure, thank you. We've got a question from Nick. Hi, Nick. Further to the question regarding needing a customs EORI number for importing to Ireland, okay? So is this the only piece of information you need from the customer and to supply to your clearance agent? Now, my understanding is this is most likely a finished product.
I'm going to have to defer on that one, James, and come back to you on that one.
Okay.
In terms of getting the detail right, Ireland is a little bit of still a fog for everybody. So I think that's why they set up the TSS. But if we can look at that a little bit more closely, and I'll come back with a specific answer on it.
Sure. Is that something that might possibly come to light a little bit more after the 23rd, or?
I think definitely, yeah. There's clarification on Northern Ireland Protocol. The Prime Minister made fairly sweeping statements very early on, saying, you know, which I think is something to do now with the Internal Markets Act. So he said very early on that exporters and importers from Northern Ireland and Ireland wouldn't have to, or certainly from Northern Ireland, wouldn't have to have any extra customs documentation. So of course, that's without creating a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and with Northern Ireland therefore being on a seamless border with the EU. The final scenario will have to wait until we see what they've negotiated.
Sure.
But certainly when you listen to Simon Coveney, who you often see on news channels, he's not referring to that at the moment at all as a problem. It seems still to be about fisheries, fair competition, as being the two stumbling blocks to reaching a free trade agreement.
Okay, sure.
It would suggest that maybe they've got all this sorted now. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Nick and his company we're quite close to anyway, so if we can leave that as an open action, Nick, and then once the information comes to light, then you'll be the first to know. Thank you. So question here from Phil, which is an interesting one, and that is, if we do manage to secure a free trade agreement with the EU, does that apply to products we've stocked from elsewhere or just UK manufactured items?
So the items that have been stocked elsewhere are going to be in free circulation in the UK. They're going to have been cleared into the UK. They'll form part of an export into the EU. So goes back to that paying duty twice. Correct answer, I think, James.
Sure. Okay. Quite an open question from Dale, and that is, what's the recommended Incoterms to request with EU suppliers? Or I guess another way of putting it would be, are there Incoterms to be aware of? You've mentioned DDP before. Yeah, so I guess you can choose to answer that in the positive sense, or the ones to maybe look out for.
Yeah, okay, fine, okay. So the moment that there were suggestions that we would be leaving the EU, a lot of EU suppliers who were selling to UK buyers said that they didn't want to trade on DDP anymore because they could see a big spike in costs and time and resources needed to do customs clearances. There are a number of ways around that in terms of either absorbing the cost yourself, but there is a delivered at point seems to be a flavour of the month at the moment, or DAP, where the buyer in the UK would take on the customs declaration areas.
Okay, thank you. Question from Ted. We currently bring over a dedicated trailer of goods from Italy every week. From the 1st of January, will we need to appoint a customs broker to clear the goods for the UK for every shipment?
As of the 1st of July, you will. You will need to find someone to do the frontier declaration, the duty implications, subject to what's agreed in the free trade agreement. You can take advantage of the deferred supplementary bit. So,
okay, thank you.
But I think really the elephant in the room is customs agent capability and resources. The government are extending, well, not extending, but they're promoting heavily the customs training grant. They are increasingly aware that the move from 55 million customs clearances to 255 million customs clearances in terms of frontier declarations is going to be a real challenge to meet. So work on trying to work with your existing customs agent in terms of how they are going to absorb your EU traffic, and or look in terms of supplementing, reducing your risk by training people in-house.
Sure, thank you. Question from Richard. Hi, Richard. The commodity codes of the products we are involved in are 0% for duty purposes at the moment. Will duty rates for these products change after the 1st of January, particularly for our European customers importing from us?
I stand to be corrected, but I believe they've pretty much agreed what a tariff would look like in relation to a free trade, obviously, because implicitly the vast majority of duty rates will stay the same. So if it's 0% now and we have a free trade agreement, it's highly likely it'll be 0% in the future.
Okay, thank you. Question from Robert, and this involves temporary imports, I believe. How will temporary imports be handled? Will we need to use carnets as we do for Switzerland?
Okay, so I believe where this is, in temporary imports. So I've seen one in relation to a big art exhibition which goes around the world. So literally, it stays at Holcombe House in Norfolk for 6 months, and then leaves the country again. And that would be accompanied by a carnet. Carnets will still be in place. I don't believe there's been any discussion to remove those.
Sure. Okay, a question from Mark, and that is, if we supply from the UK to Ireland on DDP terms, will we also be responsible for VAT in Ireland?
I believe the answer is yes, but I'm afraid we're going to have to come back in terms of the Ireland situation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, hopefully for the Irish questions, hopefully there's going to be more information that will come out on the 23rd of November, and we'll be able to cover some specifics on the webinar on the 2nd of December. Very much predicated on what Mr. Johnson does announce, I think, in the meantime. Okay. So I'm just trying to pick out. Right, we've got one for Dimitrina here, and that's, will there be a time buffer for some custom tariff codes to apply from the 1st of January importing into the UK? And then I think the second part of the question is probably a bit tricky. But
I
if
think
yes,
the answer to the first one is I don't think there will be. There's no
okay.
buffer as such. An import is an import, so it's either going to be deferred or
Yeah.
Or paid at the time. There was I've forgotten the person's name, but there was something called transitional simplified procedures back before the last worry about a hard Brexit. Any benefit that could have been gained from TSB has been withdrawn. So that's the answer to the first question, James.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I think it covers the second part as well, actually. So yeah. Okay, I think just a further clarification on the VAT front here is being asked for by one of the participants. That is, we sell goods to the Netherlands regularly, and as well as France and Germany. Are you saying that we need to be VAT registered in all 3 countries?
I believe you do.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, and another question here: if we have a GB EORI and are only importing, do we need an EU EORI too?
If you're only importing, you just need a GB EORI.
Sure. Okay. Great. Okay, I've got a question here from Adrian, and that is, so at present, Adrian's been using EC certificates of origin and other docs for exports to the Middle East. So it seems that he's exporting to the likes of the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which are prepared by the local chambers of commerce. Yeah. Will these now need to have UK certificates?
I believe so.
Okay. And that would be a case of approaching the local chamber of commerce for support on that, would it? So as it happens at the moment. Okay.
So you've got the local chamber of commerce, and also I believe that maybe the British Chamber of Commerce are doing it as well, because not all local chambers of commerce do export certifications. You have to be individually qualified to do that. So.
Yeah. Okay. There's a question from Tom which relates to hazardous goods, and if there's been any info relating to hazardous imports into the UK from the EU, anything specific that Tom can go and read up on.
I think basically I would suggest, and I think I'm correct in that it will be as per an import from a third country, so from outside the EU. So you have to have all your UN numbers right, documentation, dangerous goods documentation right, and this type of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Another question from Jeremy, who's apologising for asking lots of questions, but no, keep them coming, Jeremy. Not a problem. As a merchant shipping goods to the UK, do we have to have authorised consignor status? Sorry. So as a merchant shipping goods to the EU, do we have to have authorised consignor status?
You don't have to have authorised consignor. Authorised consignor will make it easy. It's easy, actually, a word. It will facilitate a smoother flow of goods if you have authorised consignor status.
Sure. Okay.
If you don't, you have to get the document authenticated before you arrive at the port of departure. Because if it isn't, it's very likely, well, I think pretty much certainly would be turned around.
Okay. Question from Suzanne, which is, if we sell into Europe, will we still invoice Europe zero VAT?
I can't answer that question, I'm afraid, James.
We need the specifics, don't we, really? Yeah, if you're able to elaborate on that, Suzanne, we're happy to kind of cover that in a bit of detail. You will see an email address on the final slide of today. And that goes for anybody else. So if you've got questions on questions and we don't cover them today, feel free to email those to the hello@Ligentia address that you'll see shortly, and then we can pick those up. And as I say, we'll try and answer those within 24 hours for you all. Question from Jeremy. If we are only exporting to VAT registered businesses in the EU, do we still need to be VAT registered in the countries we are exporting to? Can
you say that again, James?
Yeah, so if Jeremy is only exporting to VAT registered businesses in the EU, so third-party EU businesses who are VAT registered themselves, I think the question is, does he still need to be VAT registered in those countries that he's exporting to?
I think the answer is yes, but we'll have to let's just check on that. I'm apologise to answer questions about VAT because I'm not an accountant, but I believe the answer is yes.
Sure. And I think there's a question from Adrian on the previous question, which is just I think some final clarification on it, which is, so if we import from the EU, he needs to have authorised consignee status to make shipping smoother.
Well, yeah, sort of double negative there. So if he has authorised consignee status, it will reduce any issues of let's get these words right. So it's going to significantly reduce the probability of the consignment being stopped at the border for inspection. If there's intelligence as to why they should stop the consignment, or if it's controlled goods, then it's likely that a regulatory or prescriptive check will need to take place. But basically, by having authorised consignee or authorised consignee status, that will facilitate a smoother flow of goods in either direction into the UK and back again.
Great, thank you very much. Probably just take two more minutes for questions. We've still got quite a few in. There's a question here, which is kind of a broad question, because some suppliers are selling to us on Ex Works terms. Have you got any advice on that? I'm gathering this is European sellers into a UK importer.
UK, so there's the age-old question about Ex Works and FCA anyway. So with Ex Works, what happens if there's some damage made to the consignment as it's being put on the vehicle? So FCA covers the consignment actually being put onto the vehicle. Very crudely, if you buy Ex Works, you've got more work to do, but you have significantly more control rather than buying DDP. If you buy DDP, you're faced with an invoice which you're required to pay on the terms you've agreed. But within that DDP invoice, there can be hidden costs that aren't always obvious, and you might not always pick up as you're checking the invoice. So I think it's a case of sitting down with all the stakeholders and the key players in the supply chain and making sure that everything is very visible and clear and understood and confirmed in writing as to some people have talked about recently about a DAP plus Incoterm, where it's delivered at point, but the supplier still pays, coming to arrangement where the supplier does the duty. Well, that's not an Incoterm. It's either DAP or DDP. Sure. There's an excellent Incoterm guide, which is a book issued by the International Chambers of Commerce, James, and I'll provide Ligentia with the ISBN reference for it. I'd recommend anybody wanting clarification on Incoterm to get that book.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And we've probably got time for one more question. And as I say, we have a record of all the outstanding questions, but we've not really covered B2C. So we had a question from James on how this is going to impact B2C shipments, and that would include returns. So
just be clear what the question I'm answering here. So this would say be a delivery from Europe into the UK that you want to return? Because maybe
the information's not there, so I'm not sure if it's into the UK or from the UK out to Europe.
So for every import customs clearance, there's a customs procedure code used, and for domestic consumption, it's 400000. There are other CPC codes to cover return.
Sorry, Miles, it's from the UK to Europe. Thanks, James.
Okay, UK to Europe. Okay. Well, again, I think the answer is going to be the same. So you would use the appropriate CPC code to, if it's like a return, because a defective return or maybe covered by warranty. I believe actually that Amazon and people like this are working very hard on, or maybe already have come up with schemes to make the whole returns process easier. But the customs computer will recognize specific CPC terms or numbers, references to cover the specifics that you want to do in terms of both imports and exports.
Okay, thank you very much, Miles. I think we'll look to wrap up now. So thank you very much for your time and fielding all of those questions. Thank you also, everybody, for your engagement today also. In terms of, before everybody logs off to participate with your busy days, we have a third workshop coming up. Now, this is the one where, on the back of an announcement we're expecting on the 23rd of November, there'll hopefully be some fresh content that we're able to put in there. Again, under the strap line of we're looking at the facts rather than speculation of what we're presenting to you. So this one will take place 2 weeks today, 11 o'clock in the morning again. And to register, please visit our website on www.ligentia.com. Miles's colleague Neil will be taking up the questions and the presentation on that workshop, and I'll facilitate it again as usual. Now, in terms of more information and any outstanding questions, please refer to that email down at the bottom there. So that's a group email address that's going to be fielded by myself and our head of marketing as well. So we'll make sure any outstanding questions are covered within 24 hours. And that can be on the Brexit topic, or also there were some logistics supply chain themes that came up there. I'm very open to giving any views or market information on what's going on in today's market and projections for going forward as well. So feel free to put any questions through there, and we will come back to you directly. But no, thank you very much again for your time and great engagement, and we'll hopefully see you all in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you.